Hello, assholes. Pat Ryerke here, also known as the Patriarchy. All hail the Patriarchy. Well into 2017. Alright, so a lot of you may not know the first Patriarchy video I ever made was on the Ghostbusters film from last year. You know, the feminist bullshit from Sony where they called us all sexist for not liking their terrible trailers. And, we didn't like the movie because it had a female cast. It had nothing to do with these, four mediocre to average comedians playing iconic roles that we didn't want to see redone. And the fact that we wanted a sequel and not a reboot of Ghostbusters, but whatever. Here's some interesting news, though. This is the first time I've actually seen anyone from the movie come out and shit on Paul Feig. Because primarily since this movie's been getting negative reception since its first trailer, people have been defending Paul Feig in the cast. Like, oh, Kate McKinnon's brilliant, Kristen Wiig, Melissa McCarthy, Paul Feig did a brilliant job. Oh, raw women. Women have never been in a hit comedy movie. Even though Paul Feig has directed movies with women in them that were hit comedies like The Heat and Bridesmaids and Spy. So I don't know what the fuck Paul Feig was smoking. It's like, Paul, your other three films outgrossed Ghostbusters. These three films made more worldwide than Ghostbusters. Look at this. The Heat's budget was $43 million. $229 million worldwide. Spy. Budget was $65 million. $235 million worldwide. Bridesmaids. Budget was $32 million. $288 million worldwide. Huge hits. Ghostbusters. $144 million budget. $229 million worldwide. And let's look at the box. This is on Wikipedia, but this has been sourced for a long time. Because some people still try to debate that this film made money and it wasn't a bomb. Because they don't understand how the box office results break down. How much money the studio gets back, marketing, a lot of that stuff. Movies just don't make profit when they pass their budget at the worldwide box office. You have to make a lot more than that. Okay, so look here. With a production budget of $144 million, as well as a large amount spent on marketing, let's say $50 million plus, the studio stated the film would need to gross at least $300 million to break even. Before the release, director Paul Feig stated a movie like this has to at least get like $500 million worldwide, and that's probably low. The Hollywood Reporter estimated the film's financial losses would be over $70 million. A representative of Sony found the lost estimate to be way off, saying with multiple revenue streams, the bottom line, even before co-financing, is not even remotely close to that number. According to Variety, sources familiar with the film's financing estimate the total loss to be around $75 million. Of which, due to co-financing with Village Roadshow, Sony would lose about $50 million. Sony insiders have projected, along with co-financing, a total loss of about $25 million. Bloomberg News estimated the film lost $58.6 million. As of August 2016, sources such as Forbes and the Wall Street Journal had begun calling Ghostbusters a box office bomb. The film's performance contributed to Sony taking $1 billion write-down in January 2017. Okay, so, as you guys know, the Sony email leaks revealed that Amy Pascal had an agenda at the beginning with this movie to make a feminist film. This wasn't some bullshit narrative that people like me and guys on the internet, even though women complained about the movie too, we didn't make that up. It's in these email leaks. With the whole, those Sony email leaks that came out with that movie, The Interview. What was revealed in those was that Amy Pascal was fucking over Ivan Reitman, the original director of the movie, was fucking over Dan Aykroyd and them, had them all basically held up against a wall. She liked Paul Feig. She wanted Paul Feig to direct an all-women's Ghostbusters. There was no input creatively from a lot of the other people that worked on the original films. Like I said, Ivan Reitman was just pushed out of the way. As he had approval to pick the director for this movie, and they wouldn't let him do that. They kept holding the movie up. No tributes to Harold Ramis throughout this movie, really. They introduced the old characters in cameo roles that are terrible, that they never even showed in the marketing for some reason. And new Fall Out Boy song of the original theme, which is terrible. It's a terrible cover. Pretty much nothing but bad decisions. Paul Feig basically got a group of female comedians together and did a bunch of improv and slapped a movie together. Now, this is crazy. Dan Aykroyd's come out. I saw this on Twitter, and this is where we're getting it. Dan Aykroyd, now it's only a minute-long clip, but this is significant shit. Dan Aykroyd here criticizes Paul Feig for the failure of the movie, and he makes it very clear that's how he feels. He's not subtle about this at all. This is angry Dan Aykroyd. Now, I've had problems with Dan Aykroyd over the years with how he's tried to get this movie made, but all the evidence supports what Dan Aykroyd's saying here, and from what we know with the Sony email leaks and how the old cast members and filmmakers were treated, this seems like Paul Feig's ego got in the way of this movie consistently, and it blew up in his face. And I'm not happy. I'm not happy the Ghostbusters franchise had this film, but I'm happy that Paul Feig had something blow up in his smug face. And I've made like 4 or 5 videos on this damn movie, but this is big news. I just wanted to give you the facts beforehand. Here's what Dan Aykroyd had to say, and this has been going viral all over the internet. I'll play it here for you guys.
On to Ghostbusters again, huge, still going because they've just made a sequel, not a sequel,
yeah,
a
the
remake
girls
of it.
are great in it. Kate McKinnon and Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, what wonderful, wonderful players they are, and Leslie Jones. I was really happy with the movie, but it cost too much, and Sony does not like to lose money. They don't.
Sony doesn't like to lose money, Dan. Then why did they make the Amazing Spider-Man films in this movie and a bunch of bombs? Like, Sony's just been making bombs for a while. Why is Amy Pascal and Tom Rothman allowed to work anywhere at that company anymore? I'm not saying Spider-Man Homecoming won't be a hit, but that has more to do with Marvel than Sony. Why did they even produce this movie if they didn't want to make more? But he points out here that the movie went over budget, right? Way over budget. There's no excuse for this movie to have a borderline $150 million budget. And there was rumors the film even cost more than that. That it costs closer to $160 million. I mean, Paul Feig... This was a director completely out of his element. He went on and took a big blockbuster, special effects-driven movie, and he didn't know how to film it without spending frivolous amounts of money, and he didn't really put a movie together. There was always a theory this film was just slapped together off improvisation without much structure ideas, and this feels this way. It feels like they shot too much, and then they had to go back and do reshoots to try and make a movie. I think a lot of the decentish stuff, the stuff that's okay in the movie, was probably in a lot of the reshoots and not in the original film. But we'll continue with Dan Aykroyd. But I just want to make the point, that is funny. He says Sony doesn't like to lose money. It's like, well, they're not showing that very well.
Made a lot of money around the world, but it just cost too much, making it economically not feasible to do another one. So it's too bad. The director, he spent too much on it, and he didn't shoot scenes we suggested to him. Several scenes that were going to be needed, and he said, no, we don't need them. And then we tested the movie, and they needed them, and he had to go back, and about 30 to 40 million in reshoots. So, yeah. Wow. So he will not be back on the Sony line anytime soon.
$30 to $40 million in reshoots from Dan Aykroyd. They wouldn't take suggestions that we said they needed. They needed these suggestions, things we knew they would need. He said, we don't need them. And then they needed them. So here's a movie that $44 million over the 100 was from Paul Feig, exclusively, not listening to people like Dan Aykroyd or producers or people that have been involved with movies way longer than Paul Feig. I've always said this, Paul Feig's not a good director. I know Spy's critically acclaimed, Bridesmaids was nominated for 2 Oscars, The Heat's raved on. I don't like Bridesmaids or The Heat. Bridesmaids is one of the worst edited comedies I've ever seen. It has scenes that go on for like 10 minutes. There's this airplane sequence that just drags on because Paul Feig doesn't know how to cut a fucking movie. He's too in love with his actors and improv. He doesn't know how to structure a film around improv. He just lets people talk and keeps too much footage. Bridesmaids could be a really good 90, 100-minute long movie. Instead, it's over 2 hours. I mean, even The Heat's fucking long. Look, it's 2 hours. The only movie he's made so far that I kind of like was Spy, and even it is 2 goddamn hours. But it's sort of fun and works, but it kind of works better. And I've said this before. I love Paul Feig's work on Freaks and Geeks, a show that was on years ago. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. Terrific writing and directing he did on that show. He did wonderful work. Everything he's done after that, he hasn't shown a lot of skill as a very good technical film director. He doesn't seem to know how to shoot a movie very well. He seems to be like a poor man's Edgar Wright, in a way, where he gets these actors together and can kind of make these geeky genre comedies that are, but he doesn't have that same dynamic that Edgar Wright has with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Now, this film got a pass from critics and a lot of people, and most of the reviews, including Peter Travers' famous review, was like, "Take that, men." And that was so much of the criticism so many of the critics who gave this 2 and 2.5 star positive reviews was like, well, men are going to be crying now. And then the movie bombed, and it blew up in everyone's face who was hyping this movie up. And it ended up being a victory, I guess, for people who were against this movie. But it was really a victory for no one because all we got was the shitty reboot of Ghostbusters that killed the franchise. On IMDb, it has a 5.3. 60 on Metacritic, which actually isn't that good. It's a film that basically got mediocre reviews at best, bombed at the box office, cost too much, and it was down to this man, this effeminate man of cuckery, who consistently talks shit about the fan base of this franchise, the men in particular for some reason. Even recently at the Cannes Film Festival, he wasn't taking blame for the movie. He was still blaming it on fanboys. And he said on Twitter, I have tweets from him where he's like, fuck you guys for insulting my cast and stuff. I mean, basically, according to Paul Feig, any fault this movie had was entirely to do with the sexism within Hollywood and how people approach women in comedy and stuff like that, even though his own films contradict that point. I guess he's working on The Heat, too. So he's going back to the well. If you don't know, Paul Feig worked on The Office and actually developed a lot of the cinematography and style of the show early on when it really started to hit. And Arrested Development. So I could say that Paul Feig's probably a pretty good TV director. He seems to be good at that aspect, and he's had some success making lower budget comedies. However, he's probably never going to touch another big-budget blockbuster franchise like this, because like I said at the beginning, he was a poor choice. He was out of his element. Ivan Reitman actually stepped up considerably at the time when Ghostbusters was made and showed he could make a bigger-budgeted film. Paul Feig got a shot and he blew it. He's not going to go anywhere, but having Dan Aykroyd come out and say this, and that harsh face he makes at the end, I mean, it's a fucking smackdown. As this guy said, here, this film critic, who I saw this, somebody shared this on my Twitter, holy shit, Aykroyd just laid into Ghostbusters 2016 and Paul Feig on Sunday Brunch, like, full-on dragged him. No, I mean, that was ripping him down, like, he was blaming Paul Feig, which we've all been doing who have had a problem with this movie. The Sony email leaks clearly make it that Amy Pascal and Paul Feig were behind this movie, and you can go look this stuff up. It's very easy to find. They treated Ivan Reitman and the original cast like shit. And they had an agenda with this movie, and the agenda became very obvious to everyone early on, and it backfired. Because people didn't want that in their Ghostbusters movie. And this wasn't like Force Awakens and those movies where people try to be like, oh, feminism. It still got like, yeah, but Luke's still in that movie, and Han, and Leia, and Chewie, and it was still a sequel. It still continued the story, so fans are still going to it. This movie was trying, it had the balls to try, well, not the balls, the vaginas, to try to say to us, oh, well, we can reboot this franchise with new actors and just disrespect the old fan base and give you the finger. They even shit on the Angry Video Game Nerd. He got articles written about him all over the place for being sexist because he refused to go see the movie. They called James Rolfe a sexist. This is a guy I've met in person at a couple things. It's a wonderful man. He's married. He has a child. Not a sexist bone in that guy's body. Very human individual, very loving individual. Awful accusation to say at that guy because he didn't want to go see a fucking movie. So I've consistently said Paul Feig's not funny. I don't think he's very talented. Post Freaks and Geeks, I thought this movie was awful. I think Red Letter Media's review summed it up better than a lot of people did. They really went through. They explained why the original Ghostbusters was a great film and how this film just misses every single one of those elements. Yet it doesn't work as a standalone film either. It only was seen and watched because it had the Ghostbusters name on it. Paul Feig would have been better off to make like a $30 million low budget film with these actresses and do his own thing. Instead, I don't know. He tried to reach for the sky and show that he could bring a franchise back and be a J.J. Abrams for comedy. Well, you're not, Paul. But Dan Aykroyd, this just confirms it. This has been a lot of speculation about what was going on behind the scenes, and to me, this just confirms it. Dan Aykroyd says here he did not listen to us. It went over budget. The film was economically, it just wasn't possible for it to make enough money to make a sequel. And even so, the film with 229 million worldwide, even with the lower budget, it wouldn't have made enough profit to make a sequel. But let's make this clear. Having Dan Aykroyd says that just confirms that there was friction behind the scenes with this and Paul Feig. Paul Feig was not listening. He was being an arrogant asshole. And this piece of shit, this garbage that has been rightfully mocked for being so, is finally getting some of the old actors. I hope Bill Murray comes out and says something. It'd be great if Sigourney Weaver or any of them. I mean, I know that Rick Moranis said the script wasn't any good, and that's why he didn't want to be in it. But to all the feminists and everyone who were building this movie up a year ago, and not that anyone's doing that anymore. This movie got defeated. The call was answered, and it was shitty. But at the end of the day, though, this is great news because this just shows to me that we were right. Dan Aykroyd saying it now, and that means a lot. That means a lot having Dan Aykroyd come out and say that. Now he can go drink some of that Skull vodka he makes, or whatever. That stuff's at every liquor store I go to. Dan Aykroyd made a bunch of money off that vodka and the Skull. Whatever. What's with you people and skulls? Anyway, this is the Patriarchy. Like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, go fuck yourselves.